very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mongu Shampagi. And tonight we discuss the just released results for the primary leaving examinations for the year 2019. They were released on Friday. A lot of debate, a lot of parents, especially those with children in urban schools around Kampala, Wakiso, Mpigi, and Mukono, complaining because the trend seems to show that rural schools have tended to perform fairly well. So parents are sulking about that. There's a debate about who's performing better between privately owned primary schools and public funded schools, and this women those under the Universal Primary Education Program. Other people are thinking actually that there is a deliberate policy to try and encourage UPE schools to show that they can also perform as well as the privately owned schools, to get parents to love these public schools and take their kids there. Does that hold validity? But we'll also be questioning, one, the grading system, but the way we cover that within the media. We'll also be discussing, Rwanda says the actions of Kampala are insufficient in trying to normalize relations between the two countries. Uganda just released and dropped charges, released and repatriated 9 Rwandan nationals suspected of various criminal activities in this country. Rwanda responded, sent a few back, and the two countries. Now, February 28th is the day when Kigali closed the border, the common border. It's getting partially opened. It's not yet fully opened yet, but the relations are still a bit tense. There's a lot of work to get the two countries to work together better. And from Jinja, another building collapses. The border count is still going on, and people are asking what's going on. A number of buildings have collapsed. Who is responsible? That's the biggest question in Jinja. The architects, the engineers, the masons, the authorities, everybody's asking who is responsible for this loss of life? Who compensates those who have been killed as the search even for more bodies continues in that country? In that town in Jinja. I have to discuss that with me. I have at the extreme end here, Lydia Namubiru. Lydia is Africa editor, 50/50 Open Democracy, and a blogger. Lydia, very nice to have you.
Nice, very nice to have you, to be here. Thank you.
I have Eriasa Mokibi Serunjogi, is managing editor, weekends at the Daily Monitor. Eriasa, very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles.
And I also have with me Rizidel Kasasra, who's a senior reporter at the Daily Monitor. Very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles. Good evening, viewers.
Lydia, I want to start with you. What do you make of these PLE results? In terms of news value, in terms of fostering the debate around education in this country?
Well, I gave up trying to argue that we cover them the wrong way. You wait for the results to be released and make a party of it in the newspaper, splash students' names in no particular order across the front page, give certain schools undue publicity. I think we cover, first of all of us, in and outside of the newspaper, we pay too much attention to exam results, and then we are shocked that the education system doesn't teach critical thinking. Like, we have all of this criticism of it, but it doesn't teach critical thinking. The education is not wholesome, it's not well-rounded, but our own priorities are what's the aggregate my kid got? What's the average aggregate at the school I take my kid to? So, and then the newspaper reinforces that by making a party out of it each time the results come out.
I'll tell you something, Lydia. Being in the newsroom and having worked on the education desk as education editor for some time, one of the busiest moments for an editor is the time of exam results. Two reasons here, and Erias and Rizidel, who are active in the newsroom, will tell you. One is it gives you the numbers as a newspaper, so the excitement is real. But progressively, I think what you have realized is that by the time newspapers, reporters arrive at these schools, TVs have already arrived because their party is being thrown, and there is that excitement of carrying the kids up and showing them on TV, celebrating, and the teachers, they mobilize each other in an amazing way. But Elias, let me come to you on not just the way we're covering release of results, not just here, across the border in Kenya. They cover them exactly the same way we're doing here, that excitement of who has gotten what. What dictates that, and are we doing justice to a critical sector like education and national examinations?
Well, thank you, Charles. First of all, I see nothing wrong with celebrating. If someone feels they have won, there's no problem with that. And of course, the newspaper, every media platform will try to milk everything there can be about it. If parents want to see the faces of their children and everything that has been, that is splashed, no problem. But Lydia raises a key issue about how, again, do we discuss the other issues? And I don't think we just need to discuss that when exams come out. That is something that goes on. And I thought the most critical issues to discuss about our education system, this being the primary school system, it has been now, is it 23 years of UPE?
Of UPE, since 1997.
17. Yeah. So it's, I mean, it's a lot of time since we have had UPE, and if you may just allow me to digress into that, when the results came out, I called the headmaster of a school I once attended in Butambala, Chitagubwa. Actually, it's a very big school. Historically, it was established in 1924. So many people went through it, many even in government. Of course, there was no first grade. And he told me, of course, that's not to surprise you because it has been so many years without it, and so many schools that neighbor it. But it is the issues that we have been discussing progressively with him and with other teachers, if you want to take interest in our education system, to me that are of the biggest concern. When the results come out, I mean, they can say that we have had 20 first grades and it would still make no difference. The last time, for instance, we met, I was at the school, the pit latrines had been used up. They were full, and there is no clear mechanism that has been built into the system to ensure that their new ones are built. So they are calling on, can we get, let's say, old boys to come in and help? Can we fundraise from here or there? Because I asked, how do you do this? They said,
and this is a public school?
It's a public school. And a very big one.
How many pupils in under the UP program?
It used to have like 800. Now it has about half that. And if you may allow me say something more about that. What happens now, the way the government allocates teachers, they'll send you one teacher per 55 pupils. So this school, a P7 school, has 7 teachers. Because they'll say everyone will cater for 55. And that is a rule across UP schools. I mean, it is tragic. So I found a few teachers. Somebody says, I teach P3. So that one teaches mathematics, they teach English. You know, it doesn't work. That even when you went to school yourself, you'd see some subjects are more friendlier than others. But because of the very few teachers available, some schools have been forced into doing that. But if you can imagine that you have 55 pupils per teacher, and then the politicians say you may not charge fees, the parents are not supposed to get involved. What some parents have done, maybe you would have asked me, where did the other 400 children go? Now, some people have started schools, which they call private schools, many of them in makeshift buildings. Of course, much worse off than the standards here.
In terms of infrastructure.
Yeah, in terms of infrastructure. But they put up a semblance maybe of maybe ability to teach better. And you'll find many pupils go there. And I just keep asking if they just maybe rethought this system and said, if they, because somebody sends their child there and they pay 30,000, if they could pay that 30,000 in this UPE school to supplement whatever the government sends through, maybe you would have better schools in the villages.
Rizal, let me come to you. And Lydia, or you, Eliasa, you'd feel free to come back into this discussion. The debate over the contribution of parents to pay something small. The president was talking about it even the other day when he was on that trek. He was saying, no, you can't pay, you can't make parents pay. But the result is you actually growing the gap between those who have a realistic chance at breaking through and making themselves better, and those who don't have that chance. Because what most schools are sulking about, especially in urban areas, is that they have tended to have a few more lower grades, and second grade being one of them, second grade, third grade, than public schools that have posted better, and they're thinking this is about competition. In the newsroom, you'll face exactly the same problem with head teachers, directors running over everybody, trying to get their schools and their pupils into the newspaper. That debate about a contribution by the parents, who can afford or who wants to make a contribution?
Thank you, Charles. I think you've been reading stories all over in the media that parents are willing to pay this fee, but I think because of politics, you see RDCs and the president coming in to stop them, and in the end, these teachers, some of these teachers are not, well facilitated, and in the end, you find them trying to supplement their incomes, riding borders, and these UP schools actually normally have big chunks of land. You find teachers.
If they're not anywhere near Kampala, because the land in Kampala,
especially those up country, you find them going, they have their gardens. So in the end, they don't teach, and in the end they don't teach, and then you have the problem of poor inspection. So in the end, it becomes a very big problem. So the problem of also politics coming in, and when actually parents are willing to pay this fee to facilitate teachers, I think is also a problem.
Lydia, let me come back on this very question. One is factually, these might be only 7, but on average, government teachers on government payroll earn much better than a majority of teachers in private schools. Why is there a difference in delivery? There's a World Bank report that studied a service delivery index that was done by the World Bank, and showed that teachers are not in schools. If they're in schools, they're not teaching. Most of the time, their delivery is way below par. Not in terms of how much knowledge they have, but in terms of actually being where they're supposed to be and doing the job they're supposed to be. Number 2, you have these studies, I don't know where they fit in a discussion like this. You have these studies very consistently by Twaweza. They have released their 8th annual assessment report, Our Children Learning. Very consistently, the results are very consistent. They are the same. Pupils in primary 3, pupils in primary 7 cannot resolve a mathematical equation for a primary 3 kid. They cannot comprehend a language, mainly English, of a primary 3 kid, and they are in P7. But then when the results come, everybody's chasing after the numbers. I'll give you some numbers here. 2019, we sat a total of 695,804 pupils. Out of these, 473,893 belonged to UPE. 221,919 belonged to non-UPE pupils. They almost very slight difference between 2019 and 2018. 2018, the numbers were slightly lower, 671 total, 923. 195,796 are non-UPE, then 476, 130 are UPE kids. And you go backwards. I'll come back with a different question. Now look at the first grades. Division 1, 69,243. Division 1. This year. Last year, they were high actually, 77,133. Division 2, this is where the bulk is, 381,55. Last year, 272, 861. If you're asking the questions about, is it pay? Is it facilities? What is it that makes the difference?
Well, again, like I said, first of all, to me, looking at, so you sit about 700 students, 700,000 students, and about 10% of those get a first grade. I don't know why people obsess about that. That seems like how human intelligence distributes. That's not terrible performance, that 10% go to first grade. It's just that I suppose the loudest parents and the most opinionated parents are the parents who have most access to media platforms, rich, upper middle class parents who expect everybody to get a 4 and, you know, like make so much noise.
The ones sulking most that their children went to
a system producing 10%, like, so there are 4 divisions and 10%, like human intelligence is on a normal distribution curve. Yeah, if 10% are getting a first grade, yeah, sure, maybe 20% should, yeah, but it's not, I don't think, if to me the tragedy isn't that 10% are getting a first grade. To me the tragedy is that first grade is all they got out of primary school. Like they didn't learn to sing, dance, they didn't learn sports, they didn't get to a life outside of that, which is what happens in a lot of these schools that we use to put public schools under pressure, you know, because this school, 100% of the students got a first grade. First of all, how do 100% of the students get a first grade? Like, what happened, especially at primary school? Yeah, I understand Budo getting 100% first grade, they selected the cream. But if you're a normal primary school, admitting from the general population, how do you, those kids turn out to be geniuses? So if this, like, too much focus on the grades is actually, I think, making schools do unscrupulous things to make sure, you know, the picture looks good. But also the common perception that UPE schools are doing worse than private schools is, again, like Arias was saying, based on these few urban, middle class, rich schools. In general, the World Bank Service Indicator Survey, for instance, shows that private schools are not doing better. If you're unhappy with the quality of education in this country, generally moving your child to a private school, unless again you're rich or upper middle class, moving your child to primary school, to a private school, does not solve the problem. Private schools, like you said, pay less, so teachers have more jobs. Many of them are teaching in multiple schools. They also have extra jobs, like the teachers in private schools. It's not any better.
In the public schools, the ones who are supplementing with digging their shamba or riding a border.
Yeah, so generally, no. Just the same way, like people who have some money see a bad road and buy a 4-wheel drive, hoping, you know, to excuse themselves from the misery of the masses. People pay money, take their children to where, you know, relative to whatever your situation is, you pay money taking your child to a private school, but in general, they don't get a better deal even there. So if we're going to talk about the quality of education, I don't think positioning it as UPE versus private schools is the right framing or even the most productive. We'll talk about the quality of education in general. Overall. Yeah, and then we'll have to talk about the quality of education beyond grades, which is why I think, yes, I agree with ASI, let's celebrate when it happens, but I think as newsrooms we should use it as a news moment that we can use to bring all of this, like, broader conversation, bigger stories of Chitagoba, was it? Chitagoba Primary School and how it has fallen. Can we use, we know people are anticipating, as soon as January starts, people are anticipating results. They are interested in education. They are interested in having a conversation around education. I'd love to see newsrooms then use that you know, like stretch the shelf life of that conversation, like starting at the beginning of January. Can we do, you know, the deeper stories of these schools that are failing and the imperfect solutions parents are trying to come up with? Take your child to a new private school that was opened by the teacher who left this, you know, but is charging you 30,000, but is not at the end going to give you a much better deal. You know, can we try to use this moment, this month when there's so much excitement, these months when,
let me just step in there. Rizal introduced something interesting. Can we have a conversation about the politics of education? Can we have a conversation about the economics of education using these results? Because it's still taboo within government circles to discuss UPE and suggest that parents can contribute. The parents of OBs, OGs of Chitagobwa would want to contribute to their school, would want to make it better. You see these interventions coming in and now being a little bit accepted. At secondary school level, they might be accepted, but at primary school level, there is a lot of resistance from the political actors to say, you are putting pressure on my parents who can't afford to pay anything for their children. Let them provide them the midday meal, let them pack entanda, packed food that they should eat at school. And all this impacts the overall health of the child, the overall performance of the child. At the end of the day, that conversation doesn't come out when these results are coming out. Where should it be placed?
And now is the time to have it. I know, of course, political leaders don't want us to have these conversations, but that's exactly why we exist, to have the conversations, to force the conversations. Political leaders find undesirable. And we are brave. We talk about, NRM doesn't want to be discussed the way it's discussed in the newspapers, but we do it anyway. I just think, so I don't think we really can place this on the political leaders are doing what works for them, and I think we cannot blame them for what we are failing to do, especially since we find the courage to have those conversations when it's constitutional matters, when it is actual, like elective politics matters. We have those conversations anyway, even though they don't want us to have them. I think we just don't see this as big an issue. And I think it has something to do with our own class. Like a lot of journalists, we may not be the richest people, but we're also like UPE. We're not sending our children to UPE schools.
We may not be rich, but we're elite.
Yeah.
I mean, behave like elite.
Yes.
She talks about the issue of grades. You find a parent, a teacher, and the schools, they focus on getting good grades, and I think that's where the problem is. This system of education where you think you have to get good grades, then secondary, then go to the university. I don't think everyone has to go to the university. So I think there comes in why we need, I think, to overhaul our education system. Because look at, I've been reading a report here where at the enrollment P1 you have 1.3 kids in P1, but now we are talking about
1.3 million.
1.3 million, yeah. But now those who start for P7, they are 600,000. So what happened? Then
actually, if you ask me, that is a significant improvement. Over the years of UPE, we've been bleeding through the cracks up to 85%. Dropped to about 79%. So if you're talking about 1.3 million and sitting close to 700,000, you have bled through
50.
Yeah,
50%.
500,000.
600,000.
600,000. Half of them. And 50%. People within policy making circles will tell you that's a big celebration because we're bleeding through more.
And those,
So that's
and
worrisome.
with these statistics, those who are in grade 3, they are seen as failures. Why should you condemn as failures? That's why I think even after P7, they should go and do other things like skiing, and so that's why
there's a danger with that argument. I know someone else should pick that up. Two things. One is, personally, I feel very excited. The primary school I went to, was able to deliver me to where I am now, so I'm grateful for that. It didn't perform so poorly, but I just got results, and 50 pupils passed in Division 1, and this is a rural school, somewhere in Kasisi in rural Kabarole district. 50. The other school I started from had, I think, 16. I'll look at the numbers they sent me. 36 pupils, I think, who sat. About 10 in Division 1, and then 16 in Division 2, and I think the other Division 3. And you're thinking maybe, but the kinds of interventions that have been taking place in those schools compared to what might have happened in Chicago, where the discussions we're having with the head teacher there, fundamentally different. The other question is, people with degrees are the ones saying no, let other people get other skills, and that might raise a different discussion. The other thing is, who is sending their children back to Chicago? Is Eriasa saying comfortable, saying the cost of living is high in Kampala, let me send these kids back to Chicago, they'll have the same opportunities I have had? Where are those discussions happening? I mean, who is it?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things that have come up along the way. That's an interesting one. Maybe if I just want to answer you very quickly, is when we attended that school, we were not coming from Kampala. It were people from the village who are sending the children there, and they are still people. And those people are should be able to send their children to schools that can enable them to compete anywhere in the world. But but one thing that I wanted to talk about, because you are talking about reports that show that actually pupils in P3 or any selected grade will not be able to solve questions, problems that they should be able to solve.
No,
for
the
two
pupils
grades
in
below
P7,
them.
pupils in P7 cannot resolve a mathematical equation for grade 3, for P3, or comprehend.
Yeah, I thought you are also going to add that certain tests have been done for teachers, and they have been found to be unable to solve problems that they should be helping children solve.
For grades below them, below the classes they're
for
teaching.
grades below the
Yeah, because I think that is important. If we are going to have this conversation, although we also need to talk about teacher training. I think it is a big tragedy in its own, because you find passing senior 4 in this country is not perhaps very difficult, but if you pass well enough and they feel you can do A-level, can pass A-levels and perhaps go to a third-rate university, then you are too good to be a teacher in primary school. They pick those they feel cannot even progress normally, if I can say, and then they take them to
teachers training college.
yeah, some abandoned place, they call it teacher training college, because those are not even facilities we discuss. I don't know whether you have been to a teacher training college, because their funding, the people who teach there, not the morale. If you are just talking about the teachers, then you should be worrying about where they are trained. So they get the worst available crop, if I may say. You just need the basic grades, a few passes and whatever. Passes, then you go to teacher training college, you get a third-rate education, and then you are sent to teach in a school
Where you're supposed to produce
where
first graders.
Yeah, everything is not great, and then you expect that you're supposed to do miracles. I have interacted with a few teachers. Even when you try to upgrade, you go and let's say get a degree, and you teach in a primary school, what will happen is that will never reflect perhaps in what you get paid. It's very difficult for you to move from one grade to another.
Government has been trying to do this, creating senior education officers, even when they are not moved from the classroom to an administrative position, in an effort to try and equalize and improve pay. And maybe we need to investigate a little bit more about.
I really wish, I wish I had taken time to.
Yes,
just
you might want
that
to look. You might want to look at that, and you might also want to look a little bit more at the investment in these primary teacher training colleges. I think they graded them under core and non-core. So core primary teachers colleges are supposed to get a little bit more facilities and support than the non-core ones. But what we haven't discussed, we may not be able to discuss now, is the role and divide of founding institutions, that pulling of the rope between government and faith-based institutions that founded some of these. We need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we will just conclude on this topic and then move on to other issues. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate with colleague journalists. I have Lydia Namubiru, Eliasa Muchibi Serunjoji, and Rizdel Kasasra. We're discussing the release of results for PLE. I also need to note that Makerere University was graduating 70th graduation. The 70th graduation. You have the highest number, I think, of first first-class degrees that Makere has had in a long time, and also Chambogo had quite a number of first-class. So we can't walk away from this, Lydia, even if we wanted to. I was just getting numbers from, I got numbers earlier today from the school I went to. 50 first grade, 58 second grade, that's it. The school is a UPE school in a village, sat 108 pupils. Another neighboring school, 10 first grade, 16 second grade. I don't know about the others.
You are from Kabarore?
Yes.
There's actually something happening in Kabarore that's different from all other districts. Kabarore is an outlier in terms of school performance. So it's not just your school, the schools you know of. That as a district, they pass way more kids than others. So this,
but you know what the tragedy
is?
The tragedy is once you get out of primary school, secondary school is almost a disaster. Pupils and students are not passing in secondary school. They do very well in primary school, and I think
do they move out of the district?
Bus the children to schools in urban areas. So to Kampala, to Wakiso, to Mukono, Mpiji, to Mbarara, where most of the kids end. So the secondary school education is struggling in most of the Toro sub-region. You were saying something about, just before we conclude this, investment in infrastructure. Lydia, you talked about other skills, other engagements, music, sports, which are not happening in these schools that are posting very good grades, because all the attention is on trying to train the children to get them
into the newspaper.
Into the newspaper. What does that mean long term?
I mean, I think we all know what it means. I think we have lied to ourselves that in the end everybody is going to be academically gifted and their future will depend on how well they performed in school, even though a lot of us are already disappointed that, well, as it turned out, we are not gifted in the strict intellectual academic path, and the job market is not turning out really, really well for everybody. So I think we all know what it means, I guess, but how do you change that? I think, well, first of all, we have these conversations, but I also think we need to stop talking about education in terms of, like, in such a sort of binary way. Either the government invests in it or we take our children elsewhere. Like we need to start talking about, you know, this is a community responsibility. This is a, you know, the government should be contributing, but we should also be invested. What can I give to my local school? Whether you think of your local school as Chitagoba, where you came from, or your local school as a school in Nigeria, where you live, what are you investing in it? You know, as a person who has particular skills, as a person who has maybe 100,000 to spare a month, what are you doing investing in the schools? Or maybe as a person who is quite good at holding leadership accountable, what are you doing to make sure that education is basically more expansive and there are more options even for kids who are not academically gifted? Because we are chasing these results, and some schools push, cheat, remove the ones who will not have good first grades to make the picture look good. But at the end of the day, there are lots of people who are like falling way outside of this, and yet they had other potentials that had nothing to do with getting a D1 in mathematics. So I think we need, first of all, to all of us expand our thinking of education beyond academic performance. And I say that as a person who is also very invested in academic performance, but we need to expand beyond that, and then now start talking about, start getting involved in our communities and our schools. Even as you take your own child, you buy your 4-wheel drive equivalent of education and take them to Kampala parents. Is there something else you could do to contribute to, you know, the school in Nigeria too, that your housekeeper is taking their child to? I think we need to, that's not to say, you know, parents take on all of the burden, but I think once you start putting your 100K there, you live in care beyond that to hold someone accountable, watch the results of that school, you know, and be involved in a way that goes beyond just complaining about government.
I needed to build on that question of the involvement of the different stakeholders. Because I think that's a major missing link. It's a discussion we don't want to get involved in. There's a lot of squabbling behind the scenes on how much people can be involved, how much they can't be involved, especially when it comes to UPE schools, the fight between the government and foundation bodies, which has been raging for many years. And parents who are not actually invested, they think they're too busy with their lives. So the higher money, the more money they pay, they think the better the education their children should be getting. And now they are the ones sulking most because they are paying top dollar. Their kids haven't gotten first grade. If they have gotten first grade, they have gotten 10, 9, 8, 12. They are not getting 4. They're saying, no, how can this happen if I'm sending my child to a top school?
When PLE was released, I was laughing at my friend who posted a picture of his daughter saying she performed relatively well because she got aggregate 8. And I think that should be excellent ordinarily. But regarding participation, I actually wanted to talk about PTAs, Parent Teachers Associations. Everyone who went to a public school, they knew who the PTA chairperson was. A very powerful person who had enough power, I think, to influence even the transfer of the headmaster if the head teacher wasn't doing the right thing. And of course, the coming of UPE and the attempt by the government to de-emphasize the role of parents, I think killed PTAs in many schools. In some, I have interacted with the head teachers and whatever. There has been some initiative to try to rebuild them, but I think it's difficult to rebuild the cloud. Now it's very, for instance, I was asking one head teacher, how are you trying to cope with, let's say, the low number of teachers that you have? And said, now, I was talking to a guy who teaches in a Umea school for the Muslim Education Association, and he was telling me, now what we do, we ask parents to pay some money, and we say, okay, this is for religious education. So out of that, we can maybe get 200,000 and get an extra teacher. So in their case, they have hired 3 other teachers who are paid, by the way, only half of what those on the payroll get paid. About 200, the others get about 400 or more. So they are trying to see, can we get parents to bring in some money, and then we use it to bring in a few teachers, a few more hands, and see what we can do. I mean, it is all very difficult. But one other thing I wanted to talk about, it's related to that, is, by the way, I was watching the release on Friday, release of the exams, and the First Lady was emphasizing an important point, that we, the media and everyone, should help the public to ensure that schools don't stop pupils from sitting for exams, sitting exams because they suspect they will not pass and whatever. And then I looked around the room, looking for how many people I know on top schools and actually do that.
In that same room.
Yeah,
a lot of these UPE failures were actually educated in the private schools.
Yeah, I am sure.
Which is the problem, because you can't effectively regulate. The inspection division of schools is all but dead, because a lot of this education has been sent to private players. The private players charge what they want, run the way they want, and they're doing, that's a very interesting image, by the way, of people who are also owners of private schools.
Policy makers.
Yes, leading policy making in the education sector, and especially for the public education.
And their head says something which they know will not happen, because whatever.
Which the Minister of Education herself knows will not happen.
Because it starts from those schools, and it's difficult to police the others.
There was controversy during the sitting of PLE. That school in Busoga that stopped kids from sitting because they hadn't paid to the school its own fees, but stopped them from sitting a national examination. And the Minister of Education was saying they're going to intervene, and they're telling them, but this is a private enterprise. It's a business. So you won't tell me how to run my business. If I have these, they are my clients, I run them the way I want, so don't come dictating.
But that's the thing, is when the government wants to be involved with private schools, it is as an you know, as a heavy-handed regulator. Why isn't the government? Why did the government stop, for instance, selecting private schools to support? Why is Namagunga, Chisubi? Why are they the only government-aided private schools? There are still private schools coming up next. So there's like no relationship with the government in the ways in which when the schools are struggling, yeah, and when the schools, because of course they charge because they need to work to provide the service. So you can't just, having contributed, like having no other prior existing relationship, you know,
just walk in and say I'm a regulator.
Yeah,
here.
like no relationship works like that.
That divide, you have people running private schools being told that the media, now we're throwing the ball, kicking the can to the media. Please, the media, help us. How does the media help?
I don't think the media can help. Because the government talks about liberalization of the economy, and so this is a private entity. Why should you come in to intervene and then just direct me what to do? I think it doesn't work. But I wanted to talk about what Lydia said earlier about making our education system holistic. We should look at skills. I talked about that, and then he said, who would want their kid to go to the vocational school? But I think if you look at the education system, we are trained to be clerks. We are trained to be employed. There's no creative thinking, and I think there's a very big problem. It's a very big problem. You study, you reach the university, you get a first class, but you have no skills. So I think there's a need to overhaul our education system. The other day I was reading, I was reading, the universities, they churn out 400,000 students, graduates, but you only have 10,000, I think, jobs. So I think if the problem here is our education system that must be overhauled, I think.
I think also there are a lot of people who would like their children to who would have wanted their children to get technical skills if the quality of that education hadn't fallen so badly. For instance, when my mother was in primary school, her father wanted her to go to technical education because, being a poor man, that was a quick way to get his children into employment. The problem is, right now, technical education doesn't actually give you, like you were saying, we have divested so much from it that doesn't then lead you to
but is that
employment.
really true? Elite parents are pampering their children. Pampering their children, not teaching them the most basic of skills. How to wash dishes, carpentry, how to clean the compound. You have somebody hired, a hired hand, to slash the compound. You have a hired hand, that same hired hand picks up the grass. And the children are on playing computer games, they are watching TV, they don't wash dishes, and those are the concerns. They don't wash dishes at home, they leave their plate where they have eaten and expect the house helps to come and pick the plate. And
being exactly that kind of parent.
Just a moment. How do these same parents get their children to learn skills to do plumbing? How do they get them to do welders? How do they get them to do anything that needs to be worked on with their hands if the parents themselves are not doing that already with their children at home?
Actually, so first of all, it doesn't have to be elite parents, yeah? Most people in Uganda are not elite. There would still be a market for technical education, even if elite parents were not buying into it.
Okay.
Two, it doesn't have to be one path or the other. For instance, being exactly the parent you just described, yeah, it would be nice if there was a year-long technical education for my child who is interested in fashion to go and learn and become a seamstress. It wouldn't be their only path in life. They would still, having spent that year there, I would still pay for them to go to university because I expect them to own the design house, not to actually be the seamstress. But I understand that to own the design house, they
you need
would
to understand
need to,
the
yes,
work of the seamstress.
Yes.
Interesting way to put it. I don't know if Agilman is still doing his boot camps, which he used to organize. No, we need to move on, I'm afraid. We need to move on to the Rwanda-Uganda relations, which continue to, I don't know if they're thawing or festering. You help me understand where we stand at the moment. Yes, you wanted to conclude with something. Yes, so please, you can.
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, that issue I had talked about, the pit latrine.
Yes, yes.
Because I asked, what does it take for pit latrine to be fixed in a school? And they told me the head teacher then has to raise the issue with the district, and the district will put it in its plan, and they wait for the financial year to end, and then the councillors will have to come in and lobby and everything. But why I'm saying it, and I think it is important, because if a school cannot have a pit latrine, what can it have? I did a survey around Butambala district. Those are very many districts actually, and I found at least I asked 12 head teachers,
Very many schools,
and 8 of them told me they have had a similar problem in the past, and their problem has been solved by other people coming in, someone intending to be a member of parliament or this or whatever, to come to fix it. Another one told me, I went to Ntinda just last week, that I went to Ntinda and I asked, there's an organization that can help us, and they said they'll come and inspect the school. I said this, Buvuma Island, we had a story in Monitor Note a few months ago, where the LC5 chairperson was admitting that no school in Buvuma Island had a pit latrine.
There was a story I was involved with many years ago, somewhere in Karamoja. I think an aid organization, an NGO, went and built pit latrines, and built a pit latrine that turned out much better than the head teacher's office. So the head teacher decided to relocate his office to the pit latrine, covered the whole, and
oh my God.
Such as why I raised that matter is, if now the way our education system is managed, if there is no way to deal with small problems like that, now I just picked on the pit latrine, there are going to be so many others. If we cannot deal with those and ensure that at least the environment is healthy and livable for the people and whatever, it's very difficult to be talking about different things, and then how does that person then come out of that place, not to be this graduate who has been trending, who was asked whether one girl was her sibling, and she said, no, it's my sister. Did you see that?
People are being unkind. Being on TV is hard.
Though quite a bit of investment has been made, but that example, that story I'm talking about of Karamoja, a lot of investment has gone there now. There's a lot better infrastructure there for schools than there was before, and there is in many other areas.
By different people, which is not...
No, largely the government intervention in that area has kind of, because government has kind of
going to become like health centers, all of those empty little health center tools that once looked really good, but now have no medicine.
Or are standing without clients. That's a possibility, because retaining children in that part of the country is one of the most difficult things. We did an interview with the minister, the East African, and he was telling us the biggest problem is to have children stay in school, largely because they are chasing after their cattle, but they only come for the meal. Because the schools there provide a meal. We need to move on the discussion and go to the relations between Kampala and Kigali. Kigali says the actions being taken in Kampala are insufficient. What does that mean?
Well, when those 9 Rwandans were released, we saw Minister Kutesa saying that it was a political move to try to normalize the relations between the two countries. But at the same press conference, the ambassador Mugambaje was insisting that releasing those 9 wasn't enough. You would see right from the press conference that there was nothing much Uganda would expect from Rwanda. I think for now it's a complex terrain from the Ugandan side, trying to to balance justice and national interests here. Because of
Welcome back to the last segment of the Fourth Estate, discussing major events that dominated news headlines during the week. And one of the major and very sad stories is the story of buildings collapsing. But before you go into that, just wanted to round out this discussion on the Rwanda-Uganda relations. It's been running for a year now, almost, since February last year. But some people will tell you this is has been an on and off discussion since 2000, when we had the Kisangani clashes.
99,
Others, yeah, from 99 to early 2000. Others would stretch it even back to the Rwandan liberation struggle that started right here. So, Renee, you don't hand over your most prized asset. Where's the leverage for Kampala to negotiate anything?
I mean, but also why, if Uganda had arrested them for legitimate reason, how do you abort the entire legal process and just hand them over? Like, it seems to be admission that there was never any legitimate reason
To hold them.
in the
And Rwanda
first
can use that
place.
against you.
Yes.
Effectively.
So I think we need perhaps the president and the history of his personal relationship with the history of that personal relationship of the presidents, is making them treat this less as a national issue and more as if it was just a quarrel between the two of them, and therefore they haven't turned to the instruments that are open to governments to deal with each other, and but along the way are also resorting to those instruments more and more difficult. So okay, talks haven't worked clearly. A year is a long time to talk, and a year is a really long time for a border to be closed, for people who live at the border to have no livelihood or to risk death if should they continue to try and send the same sorghum across the border. Yeah, but again, because we didn't at the beginning, I thought Uganda was taking a principled stand. They were asylum seekers, and under law, under international law, we had these obligations to them. We met those obligations. Then along the way, all of those principles were thrown by the wayside. And now I don't think we have a really good way to resolve that issue.
Yeah, because this is clearly Rwanda is having the edge over Uganda in this, because one, you have lost your most prized asset, where you actually you can claim to have evidence, because I can tell you that the other people who were picked up, whom Kigali says in Rwandan detention facilities, are border riders accused of being spies, saloon operators, bartenders, preachers who are running churches, who were accused largely of involvement in espionage. When you look at the group of 9, majority of them are those who have substantial legal complaints against them. And you also must remember that you still have Ugandan former police officers who are in detention over the same accusations. Your former IGP is on trial, but you have moved away from that formalized process to a negotiated one that Ambassador not Ambassador Mganya, Adonia Ayebare brokered the other day.
And your counterpart finds it completely insufficient.
Yes, just you say Rwanda seems to have the edge. I don't see any edge, because in this there can be no winner. The issue is, one thing that Kigali needs to recognize is that very many things happened. For a long time, for instance, if I may just give you one more example, there were young people who ran away from Rwanda and came. They wanted to apply for refugee status at Old Kampala there, I think about 6 or so years ago. I went there to see them. I talked to the Rwandan High Commissioner here, Major General Mgambage, and he told me those are indisciplined children who must go back home. And these children actually claimed that a top official from the Rwandan High Commission would go to the police station, commandeer people around, and they lived in fear that they were going to be rounded up and taken back. No diplomat anywhere in the world will go to another country and treat it like his own and do everything. You go to the police station, and because that is way, way outside the functions of a diplomat in a foreign country.
But so that's what Leah is talking about. That
yeah, so many things happen.
The discussion should be at governmental national level. The president shouldn't treat President Paul Kagame, continue to treat President Paul Kagame as someone he recruited into the NRA, promoted and made chief of military intelligence before he went back. I mean, the man has been in charge of his own country for so many years. Kigali has been, is an independent, is a sovereign country. You don't treat it like you're treating...
I don't see how they are treating Kigali differently. Actually, in any case, for me, I feel Kigali has taken the liberty to feel too privileged about Uganda. They were all over the place here. Many people even scared of talking about what happens in Kigali and whatever. Here in Uganda, because they know they can reach you, they can do everything. You must have heard voices coming out of here, people complaining that, you see, we cannot be like we are a territory, an extension of Kigali, especially when Kali Kaihura was in charge of the police force. And when the government of Uganda now stands up and says this will stop, I think they only stood up when maybe they thought their hold on to power could be threatened by that. Otherwise, there was a lot of negligence for too long. That is inexcusable.
But isn't that an effect of you have a very informal relationship with them for better, whether it's good times or bad times, you have a really informal relationship, informal dealings with them. So they also feel like they can just walk into your backyard and do whatever.
It's like Kampala has been treating Rwanda and the leadership there as some naughty kid.
Which they are.
As some naughty kid, you will discipline. So I mean, Kigali complains and says you can't treat us like that. There was a summit that happened in for the first time when President Kagame drove all the way from Kigali to Mwea Safari Lodge to hold similar peace talks with President Yoweri Museveni, because he was afraid that if he flew, maybe something could happen to him. The relationship has been like that.
Our president has driven to Kigali.
Yes, our president has also driven to Kigali, and I have been told of security boxing each other in the corridors. But let me have you quickly, Kasasira, before we get out of here. What next? How does this get resolved, you think? What is Kutesa saying is the next step? So you've released it and said, well, they can still be arrested for other reasons. Yeah, the release was political.
Yeah, he said there's that, he used the word, where you withdraw charges against someone without, not necessarily that you have concluded the trial. But for them, they thought, raising these 9, Rwanda would return the favor. But I don't see it. I don't see it coming. So the border will still remain, I think, closed. Then we have these guys crossing the border, smuggling sorghum food, and being shot at. Actually, like Lydia was saying, life is difficult for the communities that are living along the border.
And you should add that it is illegal. It breaches the East African Common Market Protocol.
There is a case in the East African court taken by NGOs here and the traders. They're suing the government, both governments of Rwanda, for failing to uphold the East African
is that East African Common Market Protocol still functional? You have a whole fight between Kampala and Nairobi over Lato milk. Kenya has picked up all the milk and impounded it.
They haven't crossed the border.
No, they haven't crossed the border, but I think maybe next time we'll have a whole discussion about this Common Market Protocol and where we are.
And maybe we may localize it and say, now it is being localized in Zimbabwe about the fight for Quarantine. Why do we quarantine our cows while you sell yours and stuff?
Does the East African court have real teeth to compel Kigali to do anything, like open the border?
I don't know how much effective the Arusha is in policing these countries. I mean, the governments have been starving it of funds. We did publish some time back the contributions of the different countries. Uganda was performing better than any of them. Others haven't paid up to run that, to run Arusha. So even the administrative structures that exist there, the legal structures that exist, the judicial system that exists is housed in Arusha. Maybe the only functional thing is the legislature, which passes legislation that they don't respect.
Yeah.
All of them don't respect. But we need to move on. Elias, I want to start with you on this building that collapsed in Jinja, in the town center. Jinja is one of those that are supposed to upgrade to city status in June this year, alongside Fort Poto, Mbarara. I think Masaka has been added, Gulu, Mbale, and Arua. That's supposed to come on at the start of the next financial year as cities. But you have standards being exposed in a building that had gone up 3 stories, coming down, and from what we have seen, people picking up debris. There's no cement. The iron bars that were used, Eric Sakwa, the RDC, was talking about them the other day, talking about Y12, Y10, and I don't know if there's Y8. And everybody is asking, who was responsible for this tragedy? Who approved the building? What is going to happen? The police yesterday was saying, we are beginning with a basic investigation, then we might progress towards an arrest. No arrest has been made, but also there are people camped at the site looking for loved ones, saying, government, please help us get our loved ones out, identify them. By Saturday we had 6 bodies. I don't know what the number grew up to earlier today, if it grew at all.
Yeah, I don't have an update of whether there have been any more deaths, but the question you ask, who approved, for instance, I think the one who approved doesn't matter, because they are going to approve a building and people are going to do something different on the ground. I was speaking to an architect 2 days ago. Somebody I know put up a building, and the architect was there at its opening, and he was complaining in my hearing that he said, this is actually not my building. I gave you my architectural plan, and the people who built just did
their own things.
I mean, things can be altered at any stage in this country. And you have carried out some building, and you will know all you'll be required to do is to show up at the municipal office and pay your dues. If you have paid and they have given you a document to show that you have been allowed to build, you're not going to have, I have not seen it personally, that someone will come to inspect to see that you are actually sticking by what you said you'd do and everything. So it just kind of ends there. I don't think the process is so tightly supervised for you to ensure that what has been envisaged or what was approved is what actually comes up. So that, I mean, that could be a problem, but it could also
But
be...
who's responsible in that case? Because when the building finally collapses, like has happened, you have up to 15 reported still missing. You have 6 bodies recovered. Recently in Kansanga, was it Kansanga? Where a foundation caved in. And the professionals were telling you they were supposed to dig the foundation a bit diagonally, instead of vertically. The owner of the building, the people he has on site to help him with the building, have done it vertically, and therefore the soils are loose. I think it had interfered with a septic system. There was another one, I think, somewhere in Rwanda that also collapsed the same way. Life is being lost. Someone ought to be held accountable. In Jinja, this building collapsed how many days ago? Up to today, nobody has been held responsible.
You-
Not
You
the-
even have leaders commenting about it as if they have no responsibility in the matter,
Yes.
just going about how, oh, this is the size of iron bars used. What is your responsibility? Doesn't failure to come and supervise, you approve a plan, doesn't failure to come and supervise amount to, you know,
Indication.
maybe not criminal, but negligence that makes you culpable for the lives that are
This
then lost
actually
as a
would,
result?
where there is a loss of life, there is a culpability. This is culpable homicide.
Yeah.
Someone would argue it's just not an accident. It's an accident caused by some negligent action of an individual, and that individual ought to be held accountable. So whether you are the city engineer who didn't do the supervision to check the integrity of the building as it was going up, if you are the owner of the building who compromised standards, or if you are the hired the engineer or the architect who designed it, someone ought to be held accountable.
Oh, and maybe all of those people, then they can sort themselves out. But and you know, they say, okay, why don't they supervise? Because, for instance, in the case of KCCA, they walk around residential areas looking for who is putting up a wall fence so they can make that person pay, right? So at the point of collecting, where they might collect money, they show up. Why don't they show up? And okay, well, maybe they don't show up in a lot of cases and nothing goes wrong. But when something goes wrong, then they should be held accountable because they were supposed to show up and supervise.
Charles, I think in 2017 or 18, I think Monta did a story on why some of these buildings were collapsing, and I remember the writer talking about, interviewed, you know, different people in the sector. And I remember, first of all, I want to say that this corruption, this corruption. Sometimes we look at corruption only in monetary terms, you know, getting. But the moment you flout processes, I think that's corruption. Like recently we saw fake drugs that have, you know, come in Africa and is estimated to be around 200 billion shillings. So the moment the act gives the designs and then the engineers who are supposed to see that the thing is fully implemented and they don't, I think that is the first problem, these incompetent engineers. Then two, they're also talking about counterfeit.
The engineers board will say they don't have a registered engineer who's supervising that project, because engineers are supposed to be registered with them. The architects board will also tell you, we do not know who designed this, or because he's not registered with us.
No, but I think at every construction site there's an engineer. So I think
ought to be one.
There ought to be an engineer. or the person you find at the
There is
construction
a
site who is
mason
called
calling
engineer.
himself an
exactly,
engineer.
Yes.
these fake engineers. Then also the way they talked about the way they mix these building materials, cement. Then that's where the problem is. Also, Elias talked about that you have your plan. You're supposed to have one solid building, but in the end, you put 4 or 5. I mean, in the end, it will corrupt. So I think that's where the problem is, against corruption.
And
So
I think
I
many
think when
investors
these
will
things
decide,
happen-
if I can get 2 buildings out of one, why not? You are talking about the mixes not being whatever. They are talking about the concrete, which is...
Yes.
Because if somebody has hired you, and I think I have had an engineer say that, because the construction industry is suffering a bit, and there are so many people whose job it is to put up buildings. So there's this rich man who wants to put up a building, and he knows he can beat every process, maybe in that town.
To get the approvals.
Yeah. So, no, the approvals are there, but you don't have to, let's say, do one, let's say, bag of cement per a wheelbarrow less of sand or something like that. You don't have to get the mixes necessarily right for it to do it. And you are the engineer, you know that that's wrong, but you say, okay, we will push that and see. And I know they do a lot of that.
But you
I
may say,
think
isn't that the folly of man? Because you've invested, like that building, if you saw the structure and the amount of debris that is there at the moment, you've already invested anywhere, maybe 500, 800 million, 1 billion shillings. It comes down because you wanted to scatter around.
But the person who is doing the investment may be a different person from the one who is choosing to scatter around, right? Like,
No,
maybe
sometimes what he's saying is you have the owners of the building and the guy says, can we do this? I want you to do it this way. He's telling a mason, not an engineer, whom he calls an engineer. And he's picked the approvals. They specify certain things. You find it a lot down in downtown Kampala here, where they design buildings and they're supposed to have underground parking. Then they turn the underground parking into shops. Simply because the developer comes and tells you, no, this is how we shall do it. Now this one, instead of providing professional advice, says, okay boss, we can do it, provided you're paying. When it comes down, the cost of recovering from this is even much higher. So if
there's a big chance that it wouldn't, because you see,
most
for
of
instance,
them don't
for instance, in this town, I have had certain people who run certain construction companies of repute, and they tell you that, you see, we refused to take up that project because the developer wanted us to do ABCD, and we don't think it happens. But that particular developer has got other people, and they have put up the building. 6 months, 8 months,
it's up.
It's ready for occupation.
But I think when a building falls, we could talk forever who might be culpable, and those 6 remain dead, their families remain unprovided for and whatever. But I think people, families, interest groups, consumer protection groups should sue the city authority or the municipal council, given their power to enforce, to approve, to what. Then once they are sued, they will get serious about determining who was actually responsible along the way. And I think citizens are well in their rights, within their rights, to expect that their authorities, the authorities to whom they pay taxes, will protect them from certain things. Because as a single individual, you could spend all night trying to, you could spend your whole life trying to determine who is culpable where and where. But you have the people you pay your taxes to owe you certain things. And surely enforcement of standards is one of those things. And they failed. They clearly failed.
Okay.
If they're not the ones that are primarily responsible, sue them and let them do the work of determining who is responsible.
And I'm hoping that Eric Sakwa, who's been very active arresting nurses and doctors and other people, is going to look for the owner of this building and instruct the police to look for him and hold him accountable before he actually even negotiates privately to compensate the victims' families. We need to move on quickly. The National Resistance Movement. The chairman is just returned from a trek, 195 kilometers.
Not all of them.
No, he walked 64.
Fonopono said 84.
84.
A certain amount.
84, which is pretty decent for a man his age.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's returning, but now heading into the national, the ultimate will be the national conference. But you have the Central Executive Committee, the National Executive Committee, the National Conference, and immediately they end, you go to mark 30, President Museveni will mark his 34th year in power, in charge. A quick comment from each one of you and we'll get out of here. Let's start with you. What's likely to happen? The last one that was held in Chankwanzi endorsed President Museveni to run as a sole candidate, not just to run for the next election, but to run as a sole candidate.
Well, I don't see any difference between what would happen and the previous one, and I think they're most likely going to recommend him, and he'll still be the sole candidate. Yeah, I think there's been nothing much really to expect from from the conference.
Yeah, so the last one humiliated a similar one happening around this same time. Humiliated John Patrick Amama Mbabazi. I think he registered on the sole candidate paper. I think was it number 194? Towards the end there, but 194.
Because that had been in Chankwanzi.
In Chankwanzi, he had been upstaged because they it first happened in Chankwanzi, then they came and completed the thing here in Ambole and in State House in Tebe, where the other meetings took place. So the champions of that, Evelyn Anite, went into cabinet, survived the last reshuffle. The people who helped facilitate what makes President Museveni eligible to run again next year, Magezi, my friend Jackson Kafuzi still has some issues because he wasn't sworn in. Those were rewarded. The Nabanjas, the Ogwangs have been rewarded with cabinet positions. So who's going to lead the kneeling this time round? Sometimes it's shown potential to reward.
Maybe this time they'll do it by acclamation. Because you see, the important thing is you don't see this time round that anyone from NRM is going to come and pretend to want to run against the owner of the party, the person they call the national chairman. So I think what will happen at Nambole will just be a reaffirmation of President Museveni's dominance over the party he created. I think he foresaw, he always was surrounded by people who kept eyeing him and maybe hoping they'd sit in that chair and whatever. But I think now what is the fruits of his labor for all over these years have now come out completely. Nobody from within NRM can even ever dream.
You don't have a Koto Gongs
Koto Gong and whatever. I don't know, such Kubo saying. So I think after a few years from now, what will happen in Nambole, they'll just cement that position that the chairman is always right. The chairman, of course, no one can ever even think of replacing them. Maybe they could just say he's the eternal leader of NRM and ruler of Uganda, and that would be it.
Lydia, let me, you lastly, but not least, to comment on this conference and what to expect out of it. They're amending the NRM constitution. Their proposal to amend the NRM constitution. One, they are strongly against independent candidates. I don't know if they win. And then the other thing was the contest between Secretary General Kasule Lumumba trying to bar some MPs and the position of the party's legal advisor, Oscar Kika, who said, these are members of the party, you can't. They qualified not by the wishes of the Secretary General or the Secretariat, but by the constitution. By the constitution of the party.
Are they likely then to amend it to, you know, are they likely to amend that particular provision as well? But I do find people like the Attorney General of the NRM trying to still uphold some sort of process and respect for the Constitution. I find them admirable, almost romantic. What does it matter, you know? Like, like after everything that has happened, you know, after like the rest of the country knows Museveni is supreme leader, there is no other law, you know, people still people still discuss these small details as if they actually
the courage of Oscar Chika to write that letter and say, quoting the NRM constitution, saying these are made members of the National Executive Committee by provision, is it section 30, Article 13, is it 13 or something?
Is it courage?
But especially by the constitution of the
by the constitution of the NRM.
Is it courage, or is it just like living with your head in the sand? Like everything else has fallen apart.
We're a tropical country, there is no sand here. Someone reminded me.
Anyhow, well, there will be no surprises. And it's really tragic because I think more and more the NRM is basically killing itself. As people say on Twitter, they've decided to die on Museveni's hill. And Museveni is a man who is not growing any younger, so I mean, maybe we can't remove him.
He's aging very gracefully.
He is.
Our time is out, we need to get out of here.
Nonetheless.
Yes.
So I don't know why they've decided that they will live and die with him, because I think, like he says, all the people who had real political potential eventually will leave. You know, and so you have, like, the party has decided basically to commit suicide. Okay.
Our time is out. We need to get out of here. People are speculating after that meeting at was it at the president's country farm, at the family.
Mm.
Was it
Kisozi?
Kisozi? In Kisozi, of the former Secretary General, former Prime Minister, John Patrick Amama Mbabazi, whether he will receive, he's still a member of the party, he never denounced the party, and even if he wasn't, whether he would receive the special invitation, because the chairman has power to invite certain people to attend those different meetings, whether John Patrick Amama Mbabazi will show up at Nambole and attend some of those meetings or not. Speculation. People have been asking those questions, but we'll be watching, and our news team here at our news teams, both here at the at NTV, at the Daily Monitor, and us at the East African, will be following closely to see and to report what happens and how things go, if there is any major difference that comes out of the meeting of those three top organs of the national resistance movement this week. Thank you very much, Lydia Namubiru, for making time for the Fourth Estate. Thank you very much, Eliasa Mukibi Serunjoji. Thank you very much, Rizdel Kasasura. Thank you very much to you, all our viewers, for joining us tonight and always. And thank you very much to the production crew that stay up late to deliver the show to you. From me, it's a good night and have a splendid week ahead. Good night.